Thank you for having me.
Of course, thanks for being here. Now, for folks who don't know, your mom was former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, who was assassinated in 2007. But now you are the youngest foreign minister in Pakistan's history. You're 34.
That's true, yeah.
And you're a very young country. I think the median age in Pakistan is only 20, something like that, roughly 20?
60% of our population are beneath the age of 35.
Wow. So how does your age create an opportunity for leadership in a country that's so young?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think that most of, if you look at the politics in Pakistan or the political landscape, it's one or two generations above me that are the main players. So I'm sure that, given that I am so young, I'll bring a unique perspective. And I think that's so important because everybody who's in power right now or in positions of influence and making decisions for our country, they'll live for 10, 20 years. Yeah. We have to think about sort of the long picture and how climate change and poverty and all the income inequality and discrimination that people are facing across the country, how are we going to address those issues in the long term?
Do you feel like there's ever a generational divide? Between the people who you
I think absolutely. I think it's been an experience working with people from a whole host of different age groups, and absolutely I felt across sort of throughout my political career, just as a result of my age, perhaps the same ideas, same suggestions given from other people of a more senior age would be taken more seriously, as opposed to coming from a younger perspective. But at the same time, I think I'd like to say I've proven over the course of time, whether I was in opposition or as foreign minister, that age is just a number, and we can still get quite a lot done.
So it's timely having you here tonight.
Topical.
Right now, Pakistan is facing some unrest over the imminent arrest of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Mr. Khan says that your government wants him arrested so that he's disqualified from upcoming elections. Is that true?
Okay, so unfortunately, Pakistan is facing a perfect storm. Not only do we have heightened partisanship and political polarization to the extent that political parties or political stakeholders aren't even in a position to sit in a room and discuss issues amongst themselves. We're also facing an economic crisis. We're facing a security threat and security crisis and the fallout from the fall of the Afghan government and the terrorist attacks that are taking place with increasing frequency in Pakistan. We just faced the biggest climate catastrophe of our history, where a third of the land mass of our country was underwater. That's something that my generation, generations to come, are going to be paying the price for the decisions that others have taken. And unfortunately, in all this chaos and in all these, while we're facing these simultaneous crises, we have the question of Mr. Khan, who believes that the Pakistani constitution doesn't apply to him, the Pakistani law doesn't apply to him, that he can get up and leave, he's resigned from parliament and run away from the system. In this particular instance, it's not a question of me wanting to arrest Mr. Khan. I come from a family who faced genuine arrest in the face of military dictatorships. My mother, when she was younger than me, she battled an Islamist dictator at the time who threw her in prison. My father spent 11.5 years in prison and was tortured without a conviction. I would never want any politician in my country or any country to go to jail for political reasons. In Mr. Khan's case, he's under the threat of arrest because of his ego. He says that the courts are saying that he has to come to court and fight his cases, whatever cases are against them. And he says, I'm Imran Khan and I'm too important and I'm not going to turn up to court. And what we've seen over the last couple of weeks has been a complete mockery of the judicial system in Pakistan, of rule of law, of the constitution in Pakistan, where had he gone to court, there's probably no reason he had to fear imminent arrest. Because he's violated court orders time and time again, finally the courts have instructed the police to produce him before court, but he's called on his citizens, on his workers, on his supporters to come and confront the police. The police went to him with no intention of violence, and as you may be aware, Pakistan's history is full of politicians who have gone to prison, right, wrong, or otherwise. In this case, Mr. Khan is refusing to even present himself before court. He's refusing to defend himself. I'm sure if he's innocent, he'll be able to clear his name through the judicial system. So we're caught in a situation where there's this political chaos playing out on the streets and distracting from the real issues that are affecting everyday Pakistanis.
What does that say about the state of democracy in Pakistan? Is it fragile right now?
No, absolutely. Pakistan has been most of our history under direct military dictatorship. After the assassination of my mother, there was a brief period of democratic transition. Political parties came together. They reached a consensus that, we removed all the dictators' laws from the constitution, devolved power to parliament, had peaceful transfer of power for the first time in our history from one government to another. And those people, or those forces that benefit from undemocratic rule in Pakistan didn't like that. So they supported Mr. Khan and brought him into power, and that's now blown up not only in those individuals' face, but has had severe consequences for our country.
You talked about your own family, and so I just wanted to expand on that, because I think for an American audience especially, you see a lot of politicians, not just in Pakistan, but obviously many countries, regardless of political party, who are accused of corruption, accused of other charges, in and out of prison, or violence. How do you know whether someone has committed a credible violation of law or whether something is politically motivated? What's the litmus there, and how do your voters, not just from your party, but overall in Pakistan, how do they respond to that, and how do you take that temperature?
So that is something that I've lived with my entire life, because my mother was Prime Minister of Pakistan for a few years, but she spent most of her life in opposition, either in country, in prison, or in exile, fighting not one, but two military dictatorships. She spent the 30 years of her life fighting politically motivated cases where the perception was built in the media and otherwise. There's corruption and a whole host of allegations. After she was assassinated, her name has been cleared from each and every single case that was lodged against her in her lifetime. And I, as her son and who's someone who lived through that, really wish that it happened while she was still here and amongst us. Unfortunately, that was the tradition of Pakistani politics. After my mother's assassination, the big political parties in Pakistan came together and they said, look, if we're going to be fighting amongst ourselves all the time and taking our political differences as personal differences, and whoever's in power, they arrest the opposition, then we're never going to get anything done as a country. And we saw a gap of 10 years where we didn't go after each other, with two different political parties came into power. They served out their term, were voted out from the people, and the next political party came into place. Mr. Khan is the one who unfortunately broke those precedences.
So you're talking about essentially what sounds like a fragile democracy, and things that are malleable and moving back and forth. To what extent does that impact economics in Pakistan? I know that right now the IMF and you are sort of at odds, and I know that they're withholding some money until tax reforms are met. I believe that was, correct me if I'm wrong, that was negotiated by a previous government, but now you're in power,
Mr.
so
Khan,
your party needs to follow up on on what was negotiated. So how does that political instability then affect
So two
economics?
things. As far as how democratic are we right now, I would say we're in a democratic transition, and I hope that this goes well and we transition towards a more democratic society, because I believe that Pakistan is facing a whole host of problems, but no matter the problem, the answer is in more democracy. But I might be wrong, and it could go the other way. As far as our economic situation is concerned, as I mentioned, we're in the perfect storm. You're absolutely right. The deal with the IMF was made by the previous government, and the previous government violated that deal with the IMF that put Pakistan in an extremely precarious economic situation. We've also, like the rest of the world, feeling the economic impacts of the war in Ukraine, of the COVID pandemic, and at the same time, as a result, from the fall of Kabul a year ago, we've seen the return to terrorism in our country, an increase in terrorist activity that has its own impact on economics, and the climate catastrophe. The floods that took out 5 million acres of standing crops, 1 in 7 Pakistanis, that's 33 million people, were affected. Many people are still affected.
I wanted to ask you about that.
All of these things coming together, all of these things coming together, put our economy under incredible strain and stress. And you're absolutely right. Our negotiations are still ongoing and have not been concluded with the IMF. And I'm actually left of centre political party who, within our own politics, calls for an increase in tax revenue, equal addressing the income inequalities, etc. But at this point of time, I think that when Pakistan is facing such a perfect storm, some problems of our own creation, but some, like the flood and others, that are not of our own, that the conversation with the IMF really should take that into account. And I don't think it is at the moment.
But in terms of how the tax structure works in Pakistan, I don't want to get too in the weeds on tax structure. I know that's not your job. But one of the things that I was reminded of when I was prepping for our conversation, I know that you're historically from a relatively wealthy landowning family, and there are many in Pakistan. Do you know who Bernie Sanders is?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
so I know who Bernie is.
So Bernie's a big fan of making sure the 1% pay their fair share and all that. Big topic here. Is there a version of that in Pakistan? Can the wealthiest families do something to sort of help economically?
I think that's so interesting that you answer that question. From the mainstream political parties in Pakistan, with the Pakistan People's Party, and we are the left of centre political party. Today we're a left of centre political party. When we started out, we were actually a socialist political party. Okay. And my grandfather was heading the party at the time, became the country's prime minister, and that's exactly what he did. He rebelled against his own class because he was a rich, wealthy landlord that owned masses of land. But he led land reforms, which took away vast amounts of lands for the wealthy and redistributed it amongst the landless people of the area. He led industrial reforms where 22 families in Pakistan had like a death grip on our economy, and they own all the industry in our country. So then he nationalized the industry so that it worked for the many and not for the few, a la Bernie. At the moment, unfortunately, where we are in Pakistan is very far away from the vision that the founders of my party laid out, or the efforts that my mother did as far as addressing the gap between the rich and poor. And what we have is a system where the elites, like myself, can weather these storms without much pain or without feeling much difference. But whether it is our deals with the IMF or our own internal economic policy, there's an outside burden on the poorest of the poor. There's an outside burden on the bottom of the pyramid. And what we'd like to see, I believe the only way for us to have a functioning economy that works for everyone would be not only for everyone to pay their fair share as far as taxation is concerned, but we do need a fundamental reform about how we talk about our economy and what decisions we take domestically in order to achieve that.
I know that last year you did a lot of work raising awareness on the fact that a third of your country was underwater from those devastating floods. That's obviously faded from international news since then. Can you give us an update on the status of the people affected?
Thank you so much for asking. We're a country that has experienced floods and monsoons consistently. This was something apocalyptic, out of a la Noah's Ark's floods scale. I've never seen anything like it. And we're still battling with the consequences. I absolutely have been raising awareness. I'm very grateful that the international community stood with Pakistan on not one but two occasions. One at the COP, where Pakistan was the chair of the developing countries group of G77, and we helped push for loss and damage to be included on COP's agenda, which I think is a big achievement as far as the climate movement is concerned and the future of developing countries. And the second is when we had held a climate resilient Pakistan conference in Geneva, where the international community stood with us and pledged some money for reconstruction. As far as attention is concerned, of course, international media attention span is very small, and that has moved on. But the sad thing is that domestic attention has moved on. I come from the province of Sindh, which was the most devastated. 2/3 of our province was underwater as a result of this flood. The political conversation has moved on. We're talking about whether Imran Khan's going to get arrested or not. And we're not talking about the millions of people who are at the moment in danger of, I don't like to throw about words like famine, but there's a food scarcity issue for them. The people that are thrown into poverty. I mean, there's this impression, right, that it's a completely impoverished people that had no hope and they're still poor. I mean, it's awful that anybody get affected by floods, but I just want to emphasize that of these people, 33 million people that were affected, some of these people, they're not living the most elitist lives or the most well-off lives, but they were getting by. They had their little shop, they had their little bit of land that they were eking a living out of. And they've been thrown into poverty. And it's going to take us a while to claw back from that. And until we do so, unfortunately, I wish I could stand here and say that my country was paying the attention that it should to this issue. But unfortunately, I'm afraid to admit we're being distracted.
I want to ask you about solutions also. You mentioned loss and damage. Is that what you said?
Loss and damage at COP, okay. Absolutely.
Can you talk about what that is, and then also what are sort of the plans on addressing climate longer term for Pakistan?
Okay, so there are two arguments around the loss and damage debate at COP. And the more basic, more activist approach to that conversation is that rich countries, industrialized countries have created this crisis, and they're a whole host of countries.
This climate crisis.
The climate crisis, and it is a result of their industrialization, right? It's the rich world's industrialization that the poor world is paying the cost of in the form of massive floods or massive droughts, and there should be some loss of damage for this. Some people advocate for reparations. Mm-hmm. I'm actually not one of those people. Okay. I like to be left in our approach to politics and things, but I also like to get things done.
I mean, reparations-wise, I feel like India, Pakistan, and the US could get some shit from the UK.
That's exactly what I mean, right? So we haven't got any post-colonial reparations and slavery reparations. The conversation hasn't gone anywhere. I mean, fair enough. The activists who want to argue for that should, and it's a legitimate point to make. But I think a practical approach is for us to say, okay, loss and damage exists. Let's decide who's going to pay for it later, but actually it's a problem that we all have to address together. And international financial institutions are just not equipped to deal with even one climate tragedy to the scale of what we faced. Now, the unfortunate thing is it's not just one country. We have historic floods in Pakistan, so we have historic droughts in China, and at the same time, you've got forest fires here in California, or it's flooding. Mm-hmm. And so we need to rework international financial institutions. Rather than looking this as reparations, how are we going to work together to come up with the money to address loss and damage as a result of climate change? The fight to put loss and damage onto the agenda is a 30-year-old fight. At the last COP, it was achieved under the chairmanship of Egypt that it's now going to be on the agenda. Okay. It's going to take a while for this to be argued out and the international community to come to a decision. It's an important achievement, but rather than, I don't want us to pit the global north against the global south and try and find solutions to climate change like that. I believe that this is a problem too big for just America to deal with on their own or just China to deal with on their own. This is something that the world has to come together and decide, are we going to be distracted by war and conflict and the politics as usual, or are we going to find a solution to this problem? And I have just thanks, Beth. And I can say that, I've just experienced this from the Pakistani perspective, from this one flood that wiped out so much and caused so much devastation, that we're not equipped for that. I see how, whether it's domestic politics or geopolitics, get in the way of things we even can do now. So I hope that, I know that your president has done a lot of stuff domestically on climate, and I really hope that that sort of approach, that sort of mentality is translated out into the world stage, and we can work together to sort this out. Otherwise, Pakistan we've contributed less than 0.1% to the global carbon footprint. But we're amongst the 10 most climate-stressed countries on the planet. Did you know that there's a third pole? There's a North Pole and a South Pole that we all knew about and we're worried about its melting. The third pole is in Pakistan, in the Himalayan regions of our country.
Is this real or is this a conspiracy theory thing? Okay,
this is real.
I'm like, we like our numbers to go up, but I just,
the third pole is technically in Pakistan, with the largest number of glaciers on the peaks of the mountain ranges between our two countries. And as a result of climate change, obviously the North and South Pole are going to be melting, but this third pole is going to be melting. Our rivers are fed by these glaciers. So what that means is, in the short term, as this pole melts, as these glaciers melt, we will be faced by floods. The flood that we just experienced, by the way, not a riverine flood, a flood that came from the skies. We're predicted to face far more greater flooding from the rivers as these glaciers melt. Once these glaciers melt, our water source is done. We won't be able to provide drinking water to the people that live in my country. This is one country's problem when it comes to climate change. There are a whole host of other countries that are facing, for them and for us, the crisis is here and now. This is not a tomorrow issue.
For all of these issues, is there capacity to take action both in the short or long term for you, or is that something that is being worked out? And I'm asking that also in the context of, you are clearly very passionate about this issue. This almost goes back to my first question about you being a young leader in Pakistan. I would imagine you feel this issue a lot more than others might.
So there are two things. First of all, I'm very proud of the fact that my mother's last manifesto in 2007, before she was assassinated, she was the first Pakistani politician to have climate on her agenda. And I often think that had we started addressing things then, in 2007, 8, and 9, maybe we wouldn't be here today. But despite all of that, I was not the most hyper of climate activists. Like, okay, I got it. We'll do some wind, we'll do some solar, and hopefully things will be fine. My worldview changed overnight. When my home, the villages around it, the people that I know, it was suddenly just water as far as the eye could see. And now, yeah, frankly, go Greta. I'm completely, we've been forced from, until it doesn't happen to you, you don't really know what's coming. And now that it's happened to us, the thought that this could happen regularly, it devastates me, because I've never felt so disempowered in that moment. What do you do when overnight 33 million people need your help, but you don't have the tents, you don't have the rations, we're usually used to drought, we don't have boats, how do we get out to these? It was the most difficult period in my public life, and it's not on the agenda, it's not in the media conversation, but on the ground, we're feeling this like severely.
Well, this is why I wanted to ask you about it. I thought it was important work that you're doing. The Taliban is back in power in Afghanistan. I think my biggest curiosity, since they are the government in Afghanistan, they're your neighbor, what's it like negotiating with them? What's it like when you have to?
So that's an interesting question. Okay, so the Taliban in Afghanistan are now in the interim government there, and that is a result of the Doha deal process that they negotiated directly with the United States, and we, being their neighbor, even though, like the rest of the world, we haven't recognized them diplomatically, etc., are forced to engage with the reality on our border. We can't afford to sort of wash our hands and turn our backs and pretend that nothing has changed. And we are advocating not only for ourselves, but for the international community to also engage with them. I believe that we were off to a positive start initially, but given what's happened with women's education and their right to access education, it's becoming incredibly difficult for me or others like me who do want to engage with them, do want to find solutions to the problems the people of Afghanistan are facing, because they're taking these decisions that, at the very least, I mean, to say it the most diplomatically that I can, I mean, it's not helping us help them. And our consistent concern is that whatever happens in Afghanistan, Pakistan is going to be the first people to feel the consequences. There's this old saying that if Kabul sneezes, Islamabad catches a cold. And we're already seeing that. We have the United Nations says that 97% of the population in Afghanistan are falling beneath the poverty line. That means that the number of refugees and their exodus is going to be affected. Pakistan has already accepted millions of refugees in the past, but hundreds of thousands of refugees have come over since the fall of Kabul. The more the economic situation deteriorates in Afghanistan, the more cannon fodder the terrorist groups over there are going to have, the more people they're going to be able to recruit to their cause. And we have seen, since the fall of Kabul, a steady uptick of terrorist activity in Pakistan. If there's a regime that says that girls can't get education in Afghanistan, it's not going to be too long till politicians are going to start popping up in my neck of the woods saying that we should also not let girls have access to education. So I think, A, it's incredibly important to engage with them, but at the same time, my request to them and through your TV show to them would be, like, let girls learn, guys.
The contrast that you just set up is certainly pronounced, and most Americans, I think, still associate Pakistan with harboring bin Laden, with issues of terror. How do we move beyond that in terms of U.S.-Pakistan relations? What's next?
Look, so how do we move beyond that? I think that whatever happened during the sort of the war on terror and the entire period that followed, there's a fog of war, and that colors everyone's decision making, everyone's perception. What we have now is a reality in Afghanistan, a reality that has very serious consequences, first for Pakistan, but all the issues I mentioned, whether it's the refugees or terrorism. It's Pakistan's problem today. Tomorrow it'll be other countries' problem. We have to get serious about engaging on the topic of Afghanistan. I believe that based on the facts on the ground, the position and perspective of Pakistan and the United States, actually, we meet eye to eye. We see things quite we're basically on the same page. And whatever has happened in the past, we should be able to have honest conversations about that. And there can be many studies and analysis about what went wrong where. But it's also time for us to get working together on what we're going to do about the future, what we're going to do about the present day. And that's what I've been working on with my counterpart, Secretary Blinken.
I have one last question for you. I know regardless of your political party or your political opposition, clearly you are the youngest person to serve in this role. What's your message to other young people who feel called to serve?
Oh, never give up and give it your best shot. I can't tell you the amount of times, for example, when we removed Mr. Khan from his prime ministership, it was the first time in Pakistan's history that a dictator didn't come in and kick out a prime minister, that a judge didn't order the removal of a prime minister, but for the first time, our parliament voted them out. And that idea, that proposition came from me. But it took me 2 years to convince everybody else, because no one believed that it would happen. And ultimately, it did. So the one thing that I've learned from what I'm doing, that it's difficult and it's tough and all those other things. But the more young people we have who get to look at things for the long term and not just sort of the imminent future, the short-term solution, but actually have to live with the consequences of their decisions, the better decisions we can make.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your candor. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I appreciate it.